Hi folks, once again, thank you. I was doing nothing else this afternoon. I used to have hair as long as Phil's, although I didn't know him in those days. But when I was an undergrad and postgrad here, my hair was down to there. In fact, first few years when I worked in Jordanstown, my hair was down to there. I was a shifty looking creature. I don't know if I'd have given myself the job, but anyway, I got it and I was there most of my life. I was an undergrad here in 1971 to 1974, which some of you might realise were the worst years of the Troubles. About half the people killed during the conflict were killed during that 3-year period. And at no point during my sociology degree, now not medical biology or anything, my sociology degree, did the Troubles get mentioned. They impacted on us, however, as students. For example, when we were all final years doing our dissertations, the Vice-Chancellor decided unilaterally that he would give a list of all the names and contact numbers for us and the titles of the research we were doing to the security people here in case, for example, you were out doing your research in Andersonstown at night and you got lifted and they phoned up the university to say, is he a bona fide researcher? We said that we didn't particularly want their security people here or anybody else to know the details of our home addresses, etc. The Vice-Chancellor didn't withdraw, so we occupied his office until he did withdraw. Those were the days. What I'm trying to say, though, through that little bit of autobiography is this, that sociology, I loved sociology. I did a course in sociology, a summer course in New York once when I was living in the States, and I fell in love with sociology, and I'm still in love with sociology. But it's a frustrating sort of love affair because there are many things that are wrong with sociology if it's not used right, and that's an example. I think that sociology should have been telling us about the society that we were living and working in, but it wasn't telling us. So where did we begin to find out? And I think that where we began to find out about those societies was to almost sort of naturally explore interdisciplinarity. Sociology, certainly as it was taught in Queen's all those years ago, was not giving us the tools to deal with what we were dealing with, not just as academics, but as human beings. So I want to make a couple of points, 3 main points here about the theme of today. The first one is, are we talking about interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity? Multidisciplinarity reminds me of there's an old fable about blind people being asked to say what this object was, and they're each led to one part of an elephant. And one of them says, oh, it's clearly a tree trunk, and somebody else, feeling the end of the tail, says, oh, it's clearly pampas grass, and somebody else feels the trunk and says, oh, it's a boa constrictor or whatever, you know. And the moral of the story is that you only can find an elephant if you put all the bits together. You have to have all the eyes looking at it at once. That's multidisciplinary to me. It's explaining the elephant. To me, interdisciplinarity goes beyond the elephant, whatever that means exactly. What it means is that when you put the insights of different approaches together, you create something new. And I'm sorry to refer even sort of almost tongue-in-cheek to postmodernism, but you create a great word that they use all the time. You create something hybrid. You go beyond the original and create something new. And I'll give you just 2 quick examples. The work that was done in the 1970s by Stuart Hall and others in Birmingham and building up the whole interdisciplinary focus of cultural studies created something new, something that was beyond the media studies, the sociology and the psychology and the politics that it grew out of. It created something new, a new way of looking at the world. And I would argue a more recent example has been the emergence and development of transitional justice as an interdisciplinary approach to the world. So much so that this new thing is so established now that it has affected the disciplines from which it came, not least law. Law can never again be the way it was before, now that transitional justice exists. So what I'm arguing for, where my money is with interdisciplinarity and not just multidisciplinarity. It's going beyond seeing the elephant into creating some other mythical creature. Secondly, when I was talking to Ivanka the other day, the word collaboration came up a number of times, and it seems to me that collaboration may or may not have something to do with interdisciplinarity. I think that we should be collaborating with our colleagues. The odds are very much against it in so many ways, not least in terms, if you are an academic, the way in which your time gets divided up between teaching, marking, going to conferences, preparing research applications, writing research, on maybe taking a weekend off now and again. And so in the middle of all of that, it can sometimes be that you go days, weeks, whatever, doing no more than nodding at a colleague, never mind actually dealing with a colleague, right? So at least at that level, or at that level at very least, you've got to work on collaboration. But I would say there's another whole level of collaboration that's very, very valuable if you're doing the sorts of research that I'm interested in, and I'm not presuming you are, but I don't know what your interests are, but if you are interested, as Phil was saying, like in the world out there and critically looking at the world out there, and that's collaboration with people outside these bubbles in which we exist, which are called universities. And that is a whole different ball game. That requires a whole different level of skills. It requires a whole different level of time. And it requires a whole different level of, I haven't prepared this, so I want to think of the word. No, I don't know the word. I'll give you an example. Twice in my life in the last 12 years, I've done books where I've done it this way. I've interviewed people. I've taken the tapes of the interview, which, when people talk, they talk all over the place. I've transcribed them. I've rearranged them so that every word in there is what the person said, but not in the order they said it. And I've given it back to the people and said, are you happy with me to go ahead with that as what you said? I've given the whole thing back. And on a number of occasions, this meant, for example, the last book I did, 3 people withdrew their chapters when they saw how naked they looked in words. Now, that's something that we don't normally do as academics, and journalists don't do it either, although they should as well. But collaborating with people at a level, rather than coming in, parachuting in, taking their wisdom, taking their stories, and zooming back out again to get your book, requires a whole different level of patience and skills. That's all I'm saying. And that's the collaboration that, to me, is very demanding, but very rewarding when you get it right. Just talking of rewarding, one other thing, I've written with colleagues, and that's another form of collaboration, which is a very interesting one. It's very frustrating in many ways, but the value of it is that you're not only collaborating with an author, but you're collaborating with a referee. And when you get to the point of sending a thing off to a journal for referees to look at it, you've already been refereeing each other all the way through. And when it works, it's magic. I did a piece with somebody a few years ago, and when I look back in it, there are parts of it I can't remember whether he wrote it or I did. And I think that that's really rewarding, that our thoughts merged enough that I don't know who actually wrote those paragraphs. One other point, a third point, again on the basis of talking to Ivanka the other day, and this could take us the next 3 hours, but I was mentioning and passing a few times the ref, and Ivanka was saying, well, people don't know about the ref. Put it this way, if you're in our position, you bloody well know about the ref. It is the bane of our lives. The Research Excellence Framework used to be called the Research Assessment Exercise, which is this periodic judgment that HEFC makes on the quality of the research that we do in each of our departments, where we get scores, and those scores are divided on 3 areas: the products that we produce, the narrative we have about the research culture in the group, and the impact of the pieces of work that we produce, right? That happens every 5-6 years or so. It's just wrapped up there in December, although the results won't be out until the beginning of next year. And why I think it's worth mentioning is that when you get to this level, it's a hell of a reality check. That's what I'm saying. You're thinking to yourself, I'm doing this really great research, I'm loving it and everything else. And then you get to the real life of an academic institution, which is highly politicized. So there will be prejudices, there will be preferences, there will be places that you will be hinted at that you should not venture, right? What would my advice be to you? My advice would be 2 things. Firstly, be as good as you can be. No, be better than you can be. Because if you're going to venture into somewhere where they're saying to you, maybe you shouldn't venture, then you better be better than the normal, better than the average. You better be able to stand over everything you say. You better be able to evidence everything that you claim. So don't just be good, be better. And secondly, be passionate. You know, I hope as postgrads you still have an element of passion, that it hasn't been beaten out of you by this process. And if you have, remember it, hold on to it, because passion will take you a long way. And I'm glad to say that there are still some old farts that I know of who are still as passionate as they were when they were postgraduates, and long may it continue, and I wish that on you. Last point, I just want to get this on the record. Is this recording happening all right? I want this on the record. I think I got my reward for helping occupy the Vice-Chancellor's office back in 1974. When I put in my thesis, my doctoral thesis here in 1977, I was told that it was potentially libelous, therefore I wouldn't be allowed to graduate. I threatened to take Queen's to court. They backed down and said I could have my doctorate, but the thesis wasn't going on the shelves until they got it checked by lawyers. It's still not on the shelves. Thank you.